So do any of you remember those Mickey Mouse cartoons from the 1930s? The ones that were just put out on DVD a few years ago? Well, I hear there is one that was unreleased to even the most avid classic Disney fans. According to sources, it's nothing special. It's just a continuous loop, like Flintstones, of Mick walking past 6 buildings that goes on for 2 or 3 minutes before fading out. Unlike the cutesy tunes put in though, the song on this cartoon was not sung at all, just a constant banging on a piano for a minute and a half before going to white noise for the remainder of the film.
It wasn't the jolly old Mickey we've come to love either. Mickey wasn't dancing, not even smiling, just kind of walking as if you or I were walking, with a normal facial expression, but for some reason his head tilted side to side as he kept this dismal look. Up until a year or 2 ago, everyone believed that after it got to black and that was it. When Leonard Maltin was reviewing the cartoon to be put in the complete series, he decided it was too young to be unlocked, but wanted to have a digital copy due to the fact that it was a creation of Walt. When he had a digitized version upon his computer to look at the file, he noticed something. The cartoon was actually 9 minutes and 4 seconds long. This is what my source emailed to me. In full, he is a personal assistant of one of the higher executives at Disney, and acquaintance of Mr. Maltin himself. Quote, after it got to black, it stayed like that until the 6th minute, before going back into Mickey walking. The sound was different this time. It was a murmur. It wasn't a language, but more like a gurgle cry. As the noise got more indistinguishable and loud over the next minute, the picture began to get weird. The sidewalk started to go in directions that seemed impossible based on the physics of Mickey's walking, and the dismal face of the bus was slowly curling into a smirk. On the 7th minute, the murmur turned into a blood-curdling scream, the kind of scream painful to hear, and the picture was getting more obscure. Colors were happening that shouldn't have been possible at the time. Mickey's face began to fall apart. His eyes rolled on the bottom of his chin like 2 marbles in a fishbowl, and his curled smile was pointing upward on the left side of his face. The buildings became a rumble floating in midair, and the sidewalk was still impossibly navigating in warp directions, a few seeming inconceivable with what we, as humans, know about direction. Mr. Maltin got disturbed and left the room, sending an employee to find the video and take notes of everything happening up until the last second, and afterward immediately store the disc of the cartoon into the vault. This distorted screaming lasted until 8 minutes and a few seconds in, and then it abruptly cuts to the Mickey Mouse face at the credits of the end of every video with what sounded like a broken music box playing in the background. This happened for about 30 seconds, and whatever was in that remaining 30 seconds I haven't been able to get a sliver of information about. From a security guard working under me who was making rounds outside of that room, I was told that after the last frame, the employee stumbled out of the room with pale skin saying, quote, "Real suffering is not known," unquote, 7 times before speedily taking the guard's pistol and offing himself on the spot. The thing I could get out of Leonard Maltin was that the last frame was a piece of Russian text that roughly said, quote, "The sights of hell bring its viewers back in," unquote. As far as I know, no one else has seen it, but there have been dozens of attempts at getting the file on rapid share by employees in the studios, all of whom have been promptly terminated of their jobs. Whether it got ongoing or not is up for debate, but if rumors serve me right, it's ongoing somewhere under quote, Suicidemus, AVI, unquote. If you ever find a copy of the film, I want you to never view it, and to contact me by phone immediately, regardless of the time. When a Disney dish is covered up as well as this, it means this has to be something huge. Get back at me. unquote. I've yet to find a copy of this, but it is out there. I know it. Ever hear unquote nightmare? Unquote. Like a lot of other games in the 90s, it came with some switch you timed with your play. The character on the video would give you instructions on what to do while you played the game in real time. Being a scaredy cat, I refused to play it when my mom bought it for us. My brother was disappointed about not being able to play Nightmare, but my mom had a solution. She brought out quote Reprat unquote. It was a cheap, dinky little thing geared to kids my age. You went around the board, collected cheese, and the first player to reach the end would win. It seemed simple enough, and since it reminded us of quote the strap unquote, which we didn't have, there were no objections. We popped the movie into them and set up the board. The first part of the video was just a simple explanation of the rules as well as instructions on how the game worked. Then, Reprat came onto the he was not what any of us had been expecting. My smaller brother, who was only 3 at the time, immediately left the room crying. The rat did not even resemble a rat. The ears were far too big. It had a mouth lined with 2 teeth, and the inside of the mouth looked almost swollen. The most striking part about the thing, though, was the eyes. They were large, glassy, and fish-like. I asked, then muttered, then begged my mom to turn it off. Reprat suddenly shouted loudly, screaming and wailing, saying, quote, wait your turn, unquote, in a demonic, low-pitched voice that was not at all like his normal obnoxious, nasal voice. In the background, we could hear the narrator saying, quote, "Tess Reprat," and "Tess the boss," unquote, over and over again in an overly serious tone. The video was indescribable. Images crossed the screen in quick succession, overcut with Reprat's expressionless eyes. The images were some of the things I was afraid of at the time. A person looking over a balcony, a hornet slowly stinging someone's eye, an extreme close-up of a tarantula, a pit full of everything grass, and a blood-eyed syringe filled with green fluid. We immediately turned the video off, and I ran out of the room screaming, slamming my door. It took my mom 20 minutes to convince me that the video was gone, that I would never, ever see it again. I had nightmares all week about Reprat. That wasn't the last time I saw Reprat. While my girlfriend and I were preparing to move in together, I was cleaning out the closet of my room and found Reprat again, with the same and the same board game inside. It was almost perfectly intact, save for a thick layer of cobwebs and dust bunnies on top of it. This was strange. Did my mother get rid of it? And what was the game doing in my room? I let out a bit of a gasp when I found it, and my girlfriend came into the room, asking what was the matter. Breathing harshly, I said, quote, Reprat, unquote. She laughed a bit, asking if it was a joke. I shook my head, explaining that it wasn't. She didn't believe me, nobody did, and I decided that the only way to prove it to her was to show her the video.
I borrowed my neighbor's VHS and played the video for her. However, the images had changed. I saw a clown, its nose bursting and spraying blood onto the screen. I saw a woman alone in a dark room. I saw a man being forced to pick up white-hot metal and hold it in his outstretched hand, turning his hand to a leathery mess. The scratching I heard as a child continued, picking up louder and louder. Then, Reprat showed up and began twisting and convulsing, its arms thrusting this way and that. The costume wasn't a costume anymore, the felt was real fur. Its face wasn't plastic, but instead a bristle of thorns with teeth. The eyes turned inwards and suddenly popped out again. Reprat's huge fish eyes were inside out, staring right at me, watching my every move. My every expression. It grinned widely and gestured at my girlfriend and I with a single, outstretched, inhuman hand. I could hear the faintest scratching at my front door. The TV went blank and showed static. The scratching got louder. It wasn't scratching anymore, but thumping. The thumping of tiny feet on wood. My girlfriend embraced me in fear, and my senses kicked in. Before anything else could happen, I stopped the video, ejected it and unplugged the VHS. The scratching stopped. When I looked out the living room window, nothing was there. The police showed up soon after, warning us that a neighbor had seen a figure outside of our door and had called in concern. My girlfriend and I simply couldn't explain what had happened, and had to tell the police officer that it was us. I was furious that a children's game was terrifying me. I went to pick up the tape, but the VHS burned my hand. It felt like I had touched a Bunsen burner on the highest setting. We had to get the oven mitts from the kitchen in order to take it out, and even then it was scorching hot. I brought it outside, tossed it down on the sidewalk, and crushed it with my winter boots. My girlfriend and I had nightmares every night. We would both wake up in the middle of the night, and describe eerily similar images that we saw in our sleep. The scratching would always be there at night, when lights were off and the room was pitch black, save for the moonlight coming in through the window. Now, though, the scratching would happen every time I went near the front door, and every time we said Rap Rat's name. It sounded as if something very small was dragging something across the ground outside of the door. Pacing. Waiting. I would simply wait, with the covers pulled up to my neck, until I succumbed to exhaustion. At this point, I was determined to sue the company for damages. The first thing I did was call my mother and ask where she got Rap Rat. She had no idea. I found a merchant who sold versions of Rap Rat and asked how I could get in touch with the company. He sent me this email. I don't know about the game, but I know it was created by the same people who created Nightmare. The company is called A Couple of Cowboys. Try them. I did a bit more research, and discovered that the company became defunct in 1994. Only 2 years after the company created Rap Rat. I discovered why they did soon after, how Rap Rat came to be. In 1992, the year of the game's development, a couple of cowboys had commissioned a manufacturing company in Haiti to create the doll portrayed in the game. The company who created the puppet ran a sweatshop, where they forced women and children to produce the various components of the puppet, including the felt and plastic of the doll. One day, a young Haitian girl got her arm caught in the industrial sewing machine. The spring loader, unable to handle the weight on the machine, came loose and struck the child's neck, killing her instantly. A few days after the funeral, the mother of the child came to the factory, demanding to see the owner, who denied that he had anything to do with it. In a fit of rage, the mother said that the blood from the innocent would seep into every crevice of the doll, every component with which it was created, and all who touched it would die. She claimed to have summoned a fear demon and screamed, at the top of her lungs, "A pirate will curse you." The owner simply laughed and told his corporate bosses about a pirate. They spread the joke from person to person, and the game was renamed Rap Rat, a loose anagram of a pirate. Each recitation of the name a pirate brought with it a greater and greater curse. Only 2 years after Rap Rat was created, the company was shut down and the owners hired by Mattel. There were stories of the workers begging for days off, skipping work for weeks and weeks, finding the puppet in strange places. Sooner were the stories of suicides. Grim, violent suicides in which the workers would stab their hands and burn themselves to death, writing "I am fear" on the nearest surface in blood. Nobody knows where the Rap Rat doll went after the original creators disappeared. Some say that the last things the victims saw before going insane were large, sunken, fish-like eyes. Words of warning. 1. Never, ever say a pirate out loud. Saying a demon's name out loud is an invitation to them, a calling. If you have already done this, it cannot be undone. 2. Do not try to speak to or contact a pirate. 3. Avoid being awake between 3:30 a.m. and 4 a.m., when Rap Rat is the most likely to try to scare you. The audio. The VHS is back. I thought I stomped on it, smashed it to Kingdom Come, but it's back. I found it in my sock drawer yesterday. This time, I was ready. A whole bunch of people have been contacting me, trying to get the tape or some sort of video from the board game. My answer to you is that it's just too dangerous. If I did that, it could very well drive you insane, scare you to death. The video, and the game, And Rap Rat itself has some sort of strange power. Rap Rat follows me everywhere I go. I see little shadows in the corner, or hear sounds coming down the hallway when I'm the only one home. If Rap Rat is there, it will let you know, but it will never let you see it until it's too late. Of course, a lot of people have been watching the normal video from the normal board game. That's the thing. Rap Rat can be normal. It will trick you into thinking it's just a puppet, and then stalk you day and night.
Sonic.exe is a creepypasta about a strange Sonic game CD that could be either glitchy, hacked, or possibly made by someone, or something, other than Sega. I'm a total Sonic the Hedgehog fan, much like everyone else. I like the newer games, but I don't mind playing the classics. I don't think I've ever played glitchy or hacked games before, though I don't think I want to play any after the experience I had. It started on a nice summer afternoon. I was playing Sonic Unleashed. I liked how you get to explore the towns in it, until I noticed, out of my peripheral vision, that the mailman had arrived and put something in my mailbox as usual and left. I paused my game to go see what I got in the mail. The only thing in the mailbox was a CD case for computers and a note. I took it inside. I looked at the note first and realized it was from my dear friend Kyle. Let's just call him that, whom I hadn't heard from in 2 weeks. I know that because I recognized his handwriting, though what was weird is how it looked. It looked badly written and scratchy and somewhat difficult to read, as if Kyle was having a hard time writing it down and did it in a hurry. This is what he wrote. Tom, I can't take it anymore. I had to get rid of this thing somehow before it was too late, and I was hoping you'd do it for me. I can't do it. He's after me. And if you don't destroy this CD, he'll come after you too. He's too fast for me. Please Tom, destroy this godforsaken disc before he comes after you too. It's too late for me. Destroy the disc, and you'll destroy him, but do it quick, otherwise he'll catch you. Don't even play the game. It's what he wants. Just destroy it. Please, Kyle. Well, that was certainly weird. Even though Kyle is my best friend and I haven't seen him in 2 weeks, I didn't do what he asked me. I didn't think that a simple gaming disc would do anything bad to him. After all, it's just a game, right? Boy, was I wrong about that. Anyway, I looked at the disc and it looks like any ordinary computer CD-R disc, except it had black marker on it written Sonic.exe, and it was much unlike Kyle's handwriting, meaning that he must have gotten it from someone else, like a pawn shop or eBay. When I saw Sonic on the writing of the CD, I was actually excited and wanted to play it, since I'm a big Sonic fan. I went up to my room and turned on my computer and put the disc in and installed the game. When the title screen popped up, I noticed that it was the first Sonic game. I was like, awesome. Because like I said earlier, I liked the classics. The first thing I noticed that was out of place was when I pressed start. There was a split second when I saw the title image turned into something much different, something that I now consider horrifying, before cutting to black. I remember what the image looked like in that split second before the game cut to black. The sky had darkened, the title emblem was rusted and ruined. The Sega 1991 was now instead Sega 666, and the water had turned red, like blood. But the freakiest thing that was in that split-second frame was Sonic. His eyes were pitch black and bleeding with 2 glowing red dots staring right at me, and his smile had stretched wider up to the edge of his face. I was rather disturbed about that image when I saw it, though I figured that it was just a glitch and forgot about it. After it cut to black, it stayed like that for about 10 seconds or so. And then another weird thing happened. The save file select from Sonic the Hedgehog 3 popped up, and I was like, WTF? What's this doing in the first Sonic game? Anyway, then I noticed something off. The background was the dark cloudy sky of the Bad Stardust Speedway level from Sonic CD. And there were only 3 save files. The music was that creepy caverns of winter music from Earthbound, only it was extended and seemed to have been in reverse. And the image for the save file where you see a preview of the level you're on is just red static for all 3 files. What freaked me out more was the character select. It showed only Tails, Knuckles and, to my surprise, Dr. Robotnik. Now I was sure that something was up. I mean, how can you play as Robotnik in a classic Sonic game? For crying out loud. That's when I realized that this wasn't a glitchy game, it was a hacked game. Yeah, it definitely looked hacked, it was really creepy, but as a smart gamer, I wasn't scared, or at least I tried not to be. I told myself that it was just a hacked game and there's nothing wrong with that. Anyways, shaking off the creeped out feeling, I picked file 1 and chose Tails, and when I selected and got started, the game froze for about 5 seconds and I heard a creepy pixelated laugh that sounded an awful lot like that Kefka guy from Final Fantasy before cutting to black. The screen stayed black for about 10 seconds or more, then it showed the typical level title thing, except the simplistic shapes were different shades of red and the text showed only Hill, Act 1. The screen faded in and the level title vanished, revealing Tails in the Green Hill Zone from Sonic 1. The music was different though, it sounded like a peaceful melody in reverse. Anyway, I started playing and had Tails start running like you would in any of the classic Sonic games. What was odd was that as Tails was running along the level there was nothing but flat ground and a few trees for 5 minutes. That was when the peaceful music started to lower down into slow deep tones very slowly as I kept going. I suddenly saw something and I stopped to see what it was. It was one of the small animals lying dead on the ground bleeding. That was when the music started to slow down. Tails had a shocked and saddened look on his face that I never saw him have before, so I had him move along, and he kept that worried look on his face. As he kept moving I saw more dead animals as Tails moved past them, looking more and more worried as the music lowers and he moves past more dead animals. I was shocked to see how they all died. They looked like somebody killed them in rather gruesome ways. A squirrel was hanged on a tree with what appeared to be his entrails hanging out, a bunny had all 4 of his limbs torn off and a duck had his eyes gouged out and his throat slit. I felt sick to my stomach when I saw this massacre, and apparently so did Tails. After a few more seconds there were no more animals and the music seemed to have stopped. I still kept Tails to continue. After a minute passed after the music stopped, Tails was running up a hill and then he stopped. It wasn't until I saw why Sonic was there on the other side of the screen with his back against Tails with his eyes closed. Tails looked happy to see Sonic, but then his smile faltered, obviously noticing that Sonic wasn't responding to him, if not acting as if he was totally oblivious of Tails' presence. Tails walked slowly towards Sonic, and I noticed that I wasn't even moving my keyboard to make him move. So this had to have been a cutscene. Suddenly I began to have a growing feel of dread as Tails walked closer to Sonic to get his attention. I felt that Tails was in danger and something bad was going to happen. I heard faint static growing louder as Tails was but inches away from Sonic and stopped and stuck his hand out to touch him. That foreboding feeling in my gut was growing stronger and I felt the urge to tell Tails to get away from Sonic as the static grew louder. Suddenly in a split second I saw Sonic's eyes open and they were black with those red glowing dots, just like that title image. Thought there wasn't a smile. When that happened the screen turned black and the static sound was off. It stayed black for about 7 seconds and then white text appeared forming a message, saying, "Hello. Do you want to play with me?" At this point I was creeped out. I didn't want to continue with the game, but my curiosity got the better of me when I was taken to a different level with the level title now saying hide and seek. This time I was in the Angel Island level from Sonic 3 and it looked like everything was on fire. Tails looked as though he was scared out of his wits this time. He actually looked at me and made frantic gestures to me as if he wanted to get out of the area he was in as fast as possible. I was starting to get freaked out by this. I mean Tails was actually breaking the 4th wall, trying to tell me to get him out of there. So I pressed down on the arrow key as hard as I could and made him run as fast as he could. A pixelated version of that creepy theme when you meet Shadow at the ARK as Robotnik from SA2 was playing as I made Tails trek through the desolate forest, trying to help him escape from whatever he was trying to run from. Suddenly I heard that creepy laugh again. That awful, Kefka laugh. Right after 10 seconds have passed as I helped Tails run through the forest, and then I started seeing flashes of Sonic popping everywhere on the screen, again with those black and red eyes. The music changed to that suspenseful drowning jingle as I see Sonic behind Tails slowly gaining up on him. Flying Sonic wasn't running, he was actually flying. The flying pose his sprite was making looked very similar to Metal Sonic's flying pose in Sonic CD, except it was just Sonic and he had the black and red eyes again, only this time he had the most deranged looking grin on his face. He looked as though he was enjoying the torment he was giving the poor little fox as he gained upon him. Suddenly when Tails tripped, another cutscene, the music stopped and Sonic vanished. Tails laid there and started crying for 15 seconds. The scene was rather upsetting to watch and I kind of teared up myself. But then Sonic appeared right in front of Tails and Tails looked up in horror. Blood started to come down those blackened eyes of Sonic's as a grin slowly grew from his face as he looked down at the horrified fox. I could do nothing but watch. Just in a split second Sonic lunged at Tails right before the screen went black. There was a loud screeching noise that only lasted 5 seconds. The text returned only this time it said "You're too slow, want to try again?" And then that god-awful laugh came with it. I was so shocked by what had happened. Did Sonic murder Tails? No, he couldn't have. He and Tails are supposed to be best friends, right? Why did Sonic do that to him? I shook the shock off as I was brought back to the character select. The save file that had Tails was different. Tails was no longer in the box itself but in the TV screen itself, which was flickering with that red static. Tails' expression scared me. His eyes were black and bleeding, his orange fur had gone black and he had an expression of anguish on his face. Trying to ignore it I picked Knuckles next. The laugh came again and the screen cut to black again and stayed there for another 10 seconds. This time the level said "You can't run." I was really freaked out by now. I couldn't really tell if this was a glitch, or a hack, or some kind of sick twisted joke, or anything really. But despite my fear of what happened next, I kept playing. The next level looked much different. It had the ground of the Scrap Brain Zone, but the sky background looked like the main menu. It had the dark reddish cloudy sky. But it was the music that creeped me out the most. It sounded like Giga's theme right after you beat Pocky in Earthbound. I also noticed that Knuckles looked afraid just like Tails did, though not as much. More rather he looked a little unnerved. He broke the fourth wall just like Tails and looked as if he wasn't sure about going on, but I made him move anyway. He ran down the straight pathway in this dark level, and as he did the screen started to flicker red static a couple times and then that maddening laugh came again. Then after a few seconds of running I noticed several bloodstains on the metallic ground. I felt a growing sense of fear again, thinking something horrible is going to happen to Knuckles. He looked nauseated walking down this bloodstained road, but I still kept him going. Suddenly as Knuckles ran, Sonic appeared right in front of him with those black and red eyes and then red static appeared again. When the static vanished showing nothing but black screen with text saying "Fu NDU", I was now scared. Sonic found Knuckles already. What was going on? Anyway, red static came again and then I was back to the level. Knuckles looked like he was panicking, and Sonic was nowhere to be found. And this time that high-pitched squealing from the Silent Hill 1's final boss was playing. Was this some kind of boss battle with Sonic? I hope to God it wasn't. Honestly. Suddenly Sonic appeared right behind Knuckles in what appeared to be pixelated black smoke. I made Knuckles turn and then punch Sonic, but Sonic vanished in black pixelated smoke before I could even land a hit. That terrible laugh went off again. Then Sonic appeared behind Knuckles again and then I made him punch again, and Sonic vanished again laughing. Knuckles was panicking even more, and even I felt like I was going crazy. Sonic was practically playing with us. He was playing a sick twisted little mind game with me and Knuckles. Another cutscene played as Knuckles fell to his knees and clutched his head sobbing. I felt his agony. Sonic was actually driving us both crazy. And then in a split second Sonic lunged at Knuckles and the screen went black with another distorted screeching noise that lasted for at least 3 seconds. Another text message appeared. So many souls to play with, so little time. Would you agree? What the hell? Just what is going on? I started to think Sonic was actually trying to talk to me through the game, but I was too scared to think that. I was brought back to the main menu and this time the second file box had Knuckles in the TV screen. His red fur had darkened to a reddish gray. His dreadlocks were dripping with blood and his eyes were black and bleeding too. And he had a look of sadness on his face. I began to think that those are the actual characters trapped in those TV screens on the save files, but I couldn't believe it. I didn't want to believe it. So I shut off the game and took a break. I took a nap. Wish I hadn't, cause I then began to have the most disturbing nightmare. I was in pitch black darkness, though I was under the light given off by a lamp that hung high above my head. I could hear the cries of Knuckles and Tails nearby. They were saying stuff like, "Help us." And "Why did you give us to him?" And "Run away, before he gets you too." Their cries died out as I then heard Sonic laugh, his laugh. It sounded a lot like the distorted Kefka laugh. "You're a lot fun to play with, kid, just like your friend Kyle." Though he didn't last long. I was scared and looking around for the source of the voice. "Won't be long now until you join him and all my other friends." I saw him walking toward me, flickering in and out in several directions. "You can't run, kid. You're in my world now." Just like the others. When he grabbed me and I saw his bleeding black and red-eyed, grinning face, I woke up with a fright. After a couple of hours I decided to continue playing the game. I don't know why. But I had to know. I had to figure out why this was happening. So I turned on the computer, turned on the game and selected Robotnik next. I still thought that was wacky, playing as Robotnik, but anyway the level title appeared again and this time it said, which I found really freaky. This time I was in some kind of hallway. Didn't really look like it was from any of the classic Sonic games, though it has the pixelated style. The floor was shiny and checkered. The walls were a dark grayish-purple with animated candle lights and a few dark bloodstains here and there, and there was a dark red curtain hanging above on the top part of the screen. Every 12 seconds or so that red curtain sways very slowly, but whenever you're playing the game you can barely see it move. The music was oddly pleasant, a piano playing a rather sad yet peaceful song, but I knew better. This was the song that played in Hill Act 1, only it wasn't in reverse. Robotnik didn't look entirely nervous like Tails and Knuckles did, but he did have a suspicious look on his face as if he was just a bit paranoid. He did a little animation when I just left him standing. He turns his head to the left and then to the right at least twice and then shrugs at me, as if he has no idea where he was or what was going on. Even though I was scared out of my mind about what was going to happen, I had Robotnik continue onward. He did his usual running animation, you know, when you've beaten him at the end of a classic Sonic game and you chase him, as we continued going through the hallway. Then I stop at a long flight of stairs leading downward. Now I was nervous, even Robotnik seemed unsure of himself, though I pressed onward. As I led Robotnik down the stairs, I noticed that the walls have gotten darker and more reddish. The red torches are now an eerie blue. Then we landed onto another hallway. This one was longer than the last one, or at least it felt like it. And then we headed down another flight of stairs down. This one was much longer, took at least 1 full minute. And then I heard that horrid Kefka laugh again and then the music slowly faded until it was quiet. As it did the walls turned more dark red and the torches were a black flame now. When Robotnik landed onto the third hallway, I noticed he now looked really creeped out. Though he tried to hide it, I couldn't blame him, I was scared too. Suddenly, Sonic popped right in front of Robotnik the same way he did Knuckles and then red static. The red static lasted for about 15 seconds and then it showed me a most unpleasant image. The image showed an image of Sonic standing in the darkness where you can only see his face while his head and torso faded into black. He looked so real you could actually see the lines in his blue fur, as if you could actually feel the fur if you touched the screen. His face ... oh god, he had the most horrifying smile I had ever seen. And that's saying something considering I saw that image at the start of the game. His eyes are wide and black and once again crying blood, and there were two small glowing red dots in those black eyes, staring right at me, as if staring into my mind. His grin was wide and demonic. It literally stretched to the sides of his face like a Cheshire cat, except Sonic had fangs, very sharp fangs. Much like the Rayhog's teeth except more vicious looking, somewhat yellowish, and from the look of it, he had stains of blood and small bits of flesh on his lips and fangs as if he ate some animal. I stared at that gruesome image for a good 30 seconds, never taking my eyes off it. I felt as if he was actually looking at me, smiling at me. That face, it just took 10 seconds for it to etch itself into my brain for good. Then the screen flickered with red static again 3 times, and on the 3rd time I heard the Kefka laugh, except this time it sounded distorted, demonic even. It went back to the image again, except this time there was the text again, though it was messed up, but it was pretty much one of the most horrifying things I looked at since I had this game. I am God. It was when I read that message while looking at Sonic when it hit me. I realized right there and then. This Sonic was a monster, a pure evil, sadistic, all-powerful, nightmarish, demented monster. And all of his victims, including Tails, Knuckles, Robotnik and possibly Kyle, are just his little toys, and the game is the very gateway into his chaotic, nightmarish world and the very hell his victims are trapped in. Suddenly in an actual split second I screamed as Sonic lunged at the screen, screeching loudly with his mouth wide open to an unnatural length, revealing nothing but a literally spiraling abyss of pure darkness before the red static came again, this time much louder and distorted, so loud that it hurt my ears. I yelled and grabbed my ears as the red static screeched for a good 7 seconds. Then it stopped and showed nothing but black screen. As I sat there staring at the black screen, one last text came up. Ready for round 2, Tom. The Kefka laugh, now sounding more clear as if Sonic was right behind me, played again 3 times as I looked at that text in shock and confusion. Then I got booted back to the main menu, and this time the 3rd save file had a TV image of Robotnik in the same tormented state as Tails and Knuckles. Robotnik's skin turned a dull gray, his mustache drooped and had blackened, his glasses broke and blood is coming from them, and he had a mere dead-like expression on his face. I looked at Tails, Knuckles and Robotnik and I cried a bit. I pitied them for the agony they're going through. They were forever trapped within the game, forever tormented by that horrid hedgehog, and always will be. Then the computer shut itself off. I couldn't turn it back on no matter what I did. I sat there for maybe 25 seconds, horrified by what had just happened. Sonic is the very embodiment of evil. He tortures people who play his game in more ways than one, and then when he gets bored he drags you into the game, literally drags you to hell, where he can play with you always, as his toy. I can't get the game out of my computer. I think it's stuck in there. But at least I managed to turn it back on now. After I sat there for 25 seconds I heard a voice right behind me, like a whisper. Try to keep this interesting for me, Tom. I turned around to see where the voice came from, and what I saw made me scream. Sitting on my bed, staring right at me, was a Sonic plushie, smiling with bloodstains under its eyes.
I've heard how Disney loves to try and silence things that they don't want anyone to know about, and after reading this about the synopsis, I can't say I blame them entirely for their decision. I only hope this page stays up. Mickey's Best Friend is a controversial 10-minute cartoon that was shown in theaters on November 15, 1929. It was later banned, and isn't allowed to be shown again due to its history of kids requiring constant attention after viewing its content. The cartoon was animated by Works, with music composed by Carl Stalling. It isn't even available to anyone who wants to complete their collection of classic Mick cartoons. It was originally intended to be a Halloween-related short, which revolved around Mick and Eustace, an anthropomorphic dog character. Walt at the time thought kids were getting dumbed down by other shorts, and that they were mature enough to handle what he wanted to show them. Mick is driving to his workplace in his car. Along the way, it breaks down due to an engine problem, and he gets out to check it. When Mick finds out it's beyond repair, he goes into a depression until Eustace arrives and helps out by fixing the problem. Mick is relieved and introduces himself. After getting Eustace's name, Mick invites him to go with him somewhere. Eustace asks Mick if he was supposed to be somewhere, but Mick lies to him and decides to skip work. The two arrive in a cafe, where the owner spots Mick and gives him a stern look. He walks up and Rude asks Mick what he wants. After ordering, the sheriff, Pete, enters and confronts Mick, demanding that he finally pays off his late rent. Mick, on the verge of breakdown, is pitied by Eustace, who decides to pay off Mick's entire debt. The sheriff laughs and warns Eustace, telling him that Mick will only cause him trouble before leaving the scene. Mick, relieved that he's off the hook, hugs Eustace in joy. Mick leaves the cafe with Eustace and begins to introduce his new friend to the local residents through a bunch of different scenes. They don't care and walk off. The last resident they speak to begins to chuckle a bit and warns Eustace that he should be careful around that mouse. Eustace tries to get an explanation on why this person holds a grudge, but the resident is nowhere to be seen after his warning. Eustace asks Mick why he's smiling after the reception he got, and Mick admits to Eustace that he hasn't had friends before, and that Eustace is his first pal. Eustace feels bad, and seems to be hiding something with a guilty expression. Mick and Eustace, in a bunch of quick scenes, stop by a theater, play a game, and go atop a mountain viewing the scenery. Afterwards, Mick shows Eustace his home in hopes that he'll live with him. It's here where Eustace feels bad for the mouse, but finally admits that he has to leave. Mick is in shock and assumes that it's a betrayal like all of the other relationships he's had. Eustace tells Mick that he isn't pleased by the town, and especially the residents, and is going to search elsewhere. He apologizes to Mick and gives a few encouraging words before finally heading out the door. Mick rushes and grabs Eustace by the leg and pleads to stay, but Eustace shakes his head. Mick decides that he can't lose his own friend and knocks him out with a rock that was found on the ground. The next scene shows Mick walking down the stairs to his basement. He turns on the lights, where Eustace is tied onto an operating table. Eustace is still unconscious. Mick begins to sob and act apologetic. He talks to Eustace through his state, telling him that it has to be this way. He constantly shouts out that he can't be alone anymore, and finally gets a knife from under the operating table and begins to work on him from off-screen. After Eustace finally awakens, it is revealed that he is no longer anthropomorphic, but a real dog. He begins to freak out and can only make barks. During the freakout, it switches to first-person mode, and we see Mick entering the room. Eustace no longer seems scared the moment he sets his sight on Mick. Through the mouse, he feels like he needs Mick, and finally pounces and licks him. Mick tells Eustace that nobody will ever know about this, and how it will be their eternal secret. He tells Eustace that he will be known as Pluto until they part. The scene switches to Mick's home, and zooms out. The sheriff's laughter is heard along with the resident, who had warned Eustace about Mick in the first place. Background: Walt Disney was inspired to make a Halloween-themed short of a beloved mouse. Characters were created and made up on the spot, which would later become official characters. The owner of a cafe would later become Daisy Duck, and the resident attempting to warn Eustace would later become Goof, who supposedly looked a lot like Eustace's design. Pluto would also become a recurring character, but in connection to Eustace isn't mentioned. Iwerks felt disgusted during the final portion of the cartoon and demanded that the operation scene would get censored. Walt had no choice but to give in to their demands. Production of the cartoon was delayed due to many of the workers and Iwerks feeling unease for Eustace after reading the script. Production was very slow due to the employees not wanting to finish this cartoon. There was also undisclosed budget, which could be due to the animators demanding a higher pay for making something out of their comfort zone, especially the kids' cartoon. It took a few months to finish production. Reception: a lot of outrage and controversy stirred after the cartoon finally got released to theaters. It was the opposite of what Walt wanted. People claimed that their children couldn't sleep at night and would get nightmares involving getting operated on by Mick. It would even cause children, who were very young, to require constant attention because they didn't want to be alone, especially at night. Due to this, parents wanted to press charges over the content. Walt finally decided to destroy any copy of the cartoon he could come across in an attempt to hide his failures. Theories: few have pointed out how Eustace looks similar to Goof. Some have said that Eustace's features would later on be given to the more clumsy Goof. After multiple viewings, some have talked about the anthropomorphic characters being considered normal perfect beings, while the furls are considered mental disabled, and are kept as pets that are most restrained due to how dangerous they can be. While there are no connections to Eustace in future cartoons, Mick gets extremely worried when Pluto runs off, or gets lost, and will even try and risk his life in order to save his best friend. This is the only connection from Mickey's best friend that is shown in other cartoons. Sources: they used to a particular site that showed screenshots of a short, Mickey's best friend, but it is no longer accessible. The site can no longer be found, and seems to have vanished. Most of the writers for this short are now deceased, mostly due to old age. Back when they were around, they didn't want any mention of this cartoon. Some have said that this is due to guilt.
One day, I was with my brother and I asked him, "Hey, how about we watch Peppa Pig?" He agrees. Because we used to love Peppa Pig as kids. The good thing is that it's still on TV. But we never got to see the new episodes, because we got to new things like Dora the Explorer, SpongeBob and Thomas the Tank Engine. So we went to a DVD store, looking for some Peppa Pig DVDs, but we couldn't find any. But luckily, we did. But the case looked dusty and there was a sticker labeled Peppa Pig, Lost Episode. We then thought to ourselves, wow, an episode we haven't seen. So we bought it for $6.66. We were still confused. Then asked my brother, how can be a Peppa Pig episode like this would be that scary? He replied, I don't know, maybe we'll find out. So, we went home, put the disc into the DVD player and the intro started. But it was very odd. The sky was black, the music was playing in reverse, the title card with the words Peppa Pig was in blood red and Peppa looked normal. And it just stayed there. Then, the episode started. The episode was just called Why. The house was on fire, realistic fire. The camera panned into the living room, which gets more worse. George, Mommy and Daddy Pig all look scared. Then one of the sharp wood from the house fell and landed on George's stomach with blood flying. My brother vomited on the floor, but we kept going. It then cuts to outside. Then to our shocking surprise, the house exploded. There were no sign of fire trucks or ambulances during this. The dismembered heads of George, Mommy and Daddy Pig are then seen flying. Then, it cut to a hill with, oh my god, Peppa. She looked dead. In fact, she was dead. It went to static for a good 10 seconds. Peppa then appeared on screen looking very sad. Her dress was a dark gray, her eyes were missing, she was covered in blood and was crying. We felt really bad for Peppa. The picture looked more like someone would make in MS Paint. Then, Peppa began to speak the most disturbing thing ever. Why did you not watch another episode of me? Thanks to you, my family's dead. Can't you see that I'm suffering? Well, someday, you will regret it. The video ended there. We took the disc out and smashed it to bits. We had nightmares from this. So after that, I couldn't take it anymore and I put all of my Peppa Pig stuff in the recycle bin. and since up to now, I never watched another episode of Peppa Pig again. So, the next time you come across this episode, don't watch it. Watch other things, it's for your own good. It was just this Christmas that went by, and things were getting busy. I had to start buying presents for the whole family. I had just finished shopping, but I still needed to grab a present for my little cousin. She is not very hard to shop for, since my cousin is 4. She likes things like Peppa Pig and My Little Pony. She really liked, and I say liked for a reason, Max and Ruby. So, when I decided to go looking for a present, I figured something like a Max and Ruby DVD would have been perfect, since she liked to watch it on a daily basis. However, Christmas meant that many of the online DVDs were sold out on most places. I went to look on eBay as well, but figured I could not trust what condition the DVDs would have been in. So I was stuck in a rut for a while until that package arrived. I was at home, still scrolling for a stupid DVD until I heard the sound of something being pushed into my letterbox. I caught a hold of it, before my dog did, and looked at the package. It seemed to be wrapped fairly badly, with what looked like grease marks and stains on it. Naturally, as anyone would, I decided to open the package. Inside was something that I could not explain. It was a Max and Ruby DVD, but I had never seen one like it online. It was like some little kid had drawn on the front cover with a marker. The title was just, Max and Ruby, with what looked like a poorly drawn illustration of Max and Ruby on the front. There were no names or anything, but on the back, it had a list of 4 episodes, all with blunt titles. Episode _0001, episode _0002, episode _0003, episode _0004. I quickly gave the DVD a watch over. To my surprise, all the episodes were in perfect quality and seemed to have no flaws. It was as if it was a real DVD, just with a homemade cover. The only thing I thought appeared on was the episode selection screen. The episodes had names, but they were all titled Max and Ruby 1, with the numbers being changed as it went down the list. The actual selection screen was just a plain white screen with black text and nothing else. After giving it much thought, I decided to change the cover to something a little nicer by printing out a DVD cover that I had found on Google and tracked down, and the names of the episodes so they were labeled correctly. So I left the episode list screen alone, because I figured it was self-explanatory. Christmas went by, and things were fine. I gave my little cousin her DVD and she was happy with it all through Christmas, but that was only because she hadn't watched it yet. On Boxing Day, the family had gone out for lunch and left me to babysit my cousin. I was not too bothered about being left at home. I figured now was a good time to put on the DVD for her. I had put the DVD in and allowed it to play while I was in the kitchen eating my dinner. From what I could hear, she had watched episodes 1 to 3 so far. I was just about to finish off my noodles, when I heard my cousin screaming from the other room. Dropping everything, I had run into the living room and saw my cousin curled up on the floor screaming. I had looked up at the TV and I felt my heart in my throat. What I caught a glimpse of was one of the most horrifying things I had ever seen. It was what appeared to be a frame of Max and Ruby standing next to each other, in complete darkness. But what made it so horrible was their lack of faces. They had lost their noses and mouths, and their eyes were replaced with big black holes. The colors were disgusting blood red, and there was faint static in the background. It had to be the most disturbing thing I had ever seen, and it must have been on screen for at least 20 seconds, before the screen went black and our television set turned off, which alone was weird, because TVs don't usually turn off by themselves. I was able to calm my cousin down, telling her it wasn't real, and she had just had a nightmare, as she had fallen asleep in front of the TV. However, I knew in my mind it was completely real. My parents had rung me up and told me they were going to be out all night, so this was going to be the best opportunity to look at this DVD more closely. I didn't mention it to them, and as soon as they hung up I grabbed the DVD before opening it on my laptop. As soon as it loaded, I noticed that episode _0004 had now been replaced with r.i.p. Mommy and Daddy, which sent a deep chill down my back. Since my cousin was now asleep, I plugged in my earbuds so he can sleep without having to hear anything. Normally an episode of Max and Ruby would feature 3 short stories, but this episode only had 1. It started off quite happy. Max and Ruby were playing tag in the garden, and their parents were on the porch watching them play. However, something was off. The sound was playing in reverse, and the parents' faces were that of sadness. It panned to the mother and father, and in a voice of deep sorrow, the father spoke. "It's such a shame," he sighed. It then cut short to the sound of static and a loud scream, followed by the sound of 2 people choking. The sounds felt so real, it made me almost physically sick. The scene then switched to both Max and Ruby standing in front of what looked like a gravestone labeled R.I.P. Mommy and Daddy. The 2 of them had no faces. At this point, there was also no sound, apart from faint static. This scene remained on screen for about a minute and a half, before it cut away to black. It then changed scene again, now showing Max and Ruby sitting in Ruby's room. Both of them were sobbing. The sobs were so realistic and heart-wrenching that it sounded like it was recorded from a real person mourning. What happened next was probably the most disgusting, yet saddest thing I have ever witnessed. The scene had changed to Max sitting in his room. He was standing on a chair with a noose hanging from the ceiling. He placed the noose around his neck. My computer scene faded to black, as the static got louder. Almost instantly, it then cut to Ruby walking in on her brother. She let out a horrific scream, as the background turned black. The camera was panned on her face, as the sound of a chair being picked and the same choking from before began to play. The picture of Ruby's face stayed on screen for a good 5 minutes. This time, her eyes had returned as the same gaping holes. Ruby then started crying, and as before, there were no other facial features. The static slowly grew louder and drowned out the sound of her cries. The scene cut to black with the loud static. When the screen returned, Ruby was standing, now on her own, in the garden by 2 gravestones. One was labeled R.I.P. Mommy and Daddy, and the other, R.I.P. Brother. At this point, I had already been sick and was sitting all shaken. The episode seemed to have come to an end at last, as an old computer noise started playing. I was about to eject the DVD when the same image came up like it did on the TV. This time, however, there was text above the 2 rabbits which said, "Death is our only release." There were no credits or anything else. It stayed on this for a few seconds before the DVD finally popped out of my laptop. The final photo from the DVD. I sat there trying to contemplate what had happened. In my shock and fear, I made the foolish decision to break the DVD up as much as I could before leaving the house. Afterward, I shoved the pieces down the drain. Thankfully, I kept a few screenshots and saved them to my laptop. The next couple of days went past without anything unusual happening. I had a few nightmares about that DVD, but luckily that was all. My cousin had gone back home along with the rest of her family. It was a late night and my parents had gone out for dinner, leaving me to watch TV. I heard what sounded like someone posting something through the door. At this point, the DVD had left my mind, since I hadn't told anyone about it. However, it all came flooding back, when I looked down at the letter in front of me. It was just messily folded up and said, "Death is our only release."